Hi, I'm Ameera Khalid, and I'm the creator and host of the powerful podcast series produced in collaboration with the Canadian Business Council Dubai. On this podcast, I will be interviewing a diverse group of Canadians and have thoughtful discussions that I hope will resonate with other Canadians in the region and across the globe. The powerful podcast series will spotlight not only high profile Canadians who are movers and shakers, but also individuals who are hardworking, creative, innovative, and entrepreneurial with stories worth sharing. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. I hope you enjoy listening to the powerful podcast series. And if you do, please subscribe and leave your comments and ratings on iTunes. You can also follow the podcast on the Canadian Business Council's social media channels on LinkedIn and Instagram. You can also listen to the show on various podcast channels. Details will be available in the episode description. My guest today is Dr. Louise Lambert. Dr. Louise Lambert, PhD, is a registered psychologist with the College of Alberta Psychologists in Canada. She has lived in the UAE for 10 years doing organizational and educational consulting, as well as teaching and research in happiness and well-being. Thank you so much for being on my show, Dr. Louise. It is an absolute pleasure to have you. My first question to you is, did you always want to be a psychologist?
I did not want to be a psychologist, actually. I wanted to be a sociologist because I love just this idea that we're pushed and pulled by our societies in ways that maybe we don't recognize. So bigger political issues, cultural movements, technology. But I didn't do it because I grew up in northern Alberta and I thought, I don't think there's going to be much work in this or much employment in this field. And so I shifted to psychology. And my university at the time, it was psychology, economics, or education. I don't like little people and I can't count very well. So that kind of cut everything out. And here I am in psychology. Since, though, I have become passionate about it because I see that psychology drives every single thing we do as individuals, but also in small groups, collectively. And it matters. It's at the heart of everything that happens in the world. So yeah, I've become much more passionate about it now that I can see the links to everything, really.
Is there any aspect of your work that people tend to misunderstand? I feel like Netflix perhaps plays a part in this, but what's your take?
Yeah, so the question I get asked all the time, I say I'm a psychologist, which I try to avoid saying, but people are like, can you read my mind? I'm like, oh, do we still think this is psychology? Yes, I think there's still a lot of myths about what psychology is. So people think it's mind reading, or they think, are you diagnosing me? No. Yes, Netflix media has maybe made psychology very accessible to everybody, and that's good. On the other hand, it's made psychology accessible to everybody. And so everybody thinks they're a psychologist now. And there's certainly a lot more behind what you read in self-help books. So I think that's definitely the biggest. People start either spontaneously telling me their problems or worry that I'm diagnosing theirs. I'm not.
What is the biggest challenge you're facing in your role right now, and how are you tackling it?
So right now, what's big for me is climate change. And I'm really looking at the links between human behavior, the sense of it's not my problem, I don't want to hear about it, or, oh my gosh, it is my problem, I'm so anxious and overwhelmed, what do I do? We all have our reactions to climate action. And so for me, that's the biggest thing now is how do we harness people's awareness, willingness, motivation to take climate action, but not make them so overly aware that they become stressed and anxious and overwhelmed and go back and hide and say, this is just too big for me. Somebody else can do that. So it's trying to find that fine balance, that fine line, but also keeping people hopeful and optimistic that, there are things we can do. It is admittedly a small window. It is a massive problem. It's far more complex than any individual alone can tackle, but we have to act. I mean, we really just don't have a choice. So that's my big thing right now. I'm trying to talk a lot about climate change on my posts, but also in the classroom. Just it's something that's really threatening our humanity, but also our mental health and our well-being also. So it's important. It matters. And how we think and feel and what we do about it is directly related to the outcomes of climate change.
Yeah, and I think we were on the right track with plans to tackle climate change, but then COVID happened and derailed the plans globally. But I hope after COP26 we get back on track and head again in the right direction.
Yeah, let's hope.
Now, I would like to talk a little bit more about your work. Tell us something about you that people familiar with your work wouldn't know.
So the other piece that I do, I'm also the editor of the Middle East Journal of Positive Psychology. I also do research in well-being, better known as happiness. So in the science, we actually don't use that word, but basically what makes life worth living. So we look at things like meaning, purpose, positive emotions, states of engagement, our relationships to other people, our relationships to communities, our relationships to our bigger world, sense of achievement, accomplishments, a whole range of things. And all of these things matter and all of these things can be measured. So I teach some of this stuff. I do research in some of this stuff. I do a lot of experimental studies, intervention studies, actually testing out strategies on people. But in all of that, to answer your question, I'm very much a pessimist. I kind of have to hide this sometimes. People are like, really? And I'm like, well, yeah, but I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing. And within positive psychology, we have different types of pessimism, different types of optimism. So we have a realistic pessimism, which, you're focusing on the bad things for the purpose of being able to plan and prepare for them so that you have room for optimism, so that you don't get blindsided or taken by surprise when these things happen. So I think I'm more of a realistic pessimist, and I may be less of an optimist as I should be or as people expect me to be. And in part, I'm guided a lot by the science. So the science would suggest that, whether you're optimistic about something or not doesn't really have a bearing on the outcome. It just makes you feel better while you get there or while you don't. So I've kind of said, well, okay, then why bother? I'm just going to move on and make my plan and focus on that instead. Now, are there times when I could be more optimistic? Yes, of course. But that would probably be one thing that people are quite surprised about is here's a pessimist studying happiness and well-being.
Your work sounds amazing. I'm going to have to do some research on this myself. Dr. Louise, my next question is about your journey from Canada to Dubai. What brings you here, and how has your experience been so far?
Yeah, so I moved here 2003, so a while ago. I was in Elaine for 3 years, and I think I was just getting kind of bored in Canada. Canada's great, but it can be a little bit boring. It's very stable, it's very reliable, it is what it is. There's no surprises, it's very transparent, there's no hidden agenda, and I really appreciate that. I was drawn a little bit, I guess, to some of at that time in 2003, a little bit of the mystery, a little bit of the unpredictability. So I made my way here. Again, I was in Elaine for 3 years, which was good. It's small, or it was small, very easy to make friends and get into that expat community. And then I went home after my 3-year contract. And like most expats, you go home and you last a couple of months and you think, oh my gosh, I can't deal with all this stability. And then I came back again. So this is kind of my second time here. So all said and done, I've been here about 10 years now in total. And it's become home. It's really changed in the years. I think at first it really was about expat life, and now it's about normal life. We've kind of dropped the expat and this has become home. And I like the diversity. I like the difference. I like the changes. At the same time, those are also the same things that, make for a stressful day, because you just want to say, can we all agree on doing things right or the one way? I don't care if it's wrong. Can we just all agree? But no, I feel a sense of belonging. I like the diversity. I like the difference. There's space for everybody. Everybody's welcome. Everybody's represented in some way. There's nothing I can't do here that I would do at home. And I like it. It's always funny. I go home and the first question people ask, that old question, what's it like being a woman there? And I think, oh boy, can we think of a new question? Because that is just not relevant here. And I feel in many ways my experience as a woman here is better. I'm much more respected here. I'm not to say Canadians are disrespectful to women, but you lose a little bit of your specialness with equality. Although equality has its advantages, at the same time, I am equal here, but I've got a little bit more.
Yeah, you can play the woman card in certain situations.
Exactly. And, I like that. Like, I get the best of both. And I appreciate that. But it comes from a place of respect as well. And I like it. I feel at home here.
Dr. Louise, is there an interesting story that you'd like to share from your time in the UAE?
Well, maybe just to highlight that same point. So this was maybe right when I arrived. I was sitting in a line with a bunch of national students, and I was on my big feminist card, and I was trying to be very respectful, but at the same time, I was trying to thinking my way is the right way. And it was one of the students who said to me, "Can you specifically name what you can do and I can't?" And I really had to go, "Oh." But really, I couldn't think of a good reason, compelling reason to say that one place was better than the other. And that's when I thought, okay, humility here. It's different. They're just different. One is not necessarily better than the other. So I've just come to appreciate there's different ways to do things, different outcomes, but of the same equal value.
My next question is, what is the one thing that you dearly miss from Canada, besides the snow, obviously?
I do miss the snow. I miss nature. It's not to say we don't have it here, but I did not grow up in the desert. So I'm like, this is not my thing. Green parks, riding my bike in the forest, like bike trails. Oh my gosh, I miss that. Lying in the grass, like real grass, like proper grass, not like turf grass. Yeah, I think that's really the only thing. And also being able to go outside and not feel like you're going to die. So yeah, I think just being able to be outside in nature, that'd probably be the only drawback here.
The Canadian Business Council is such a great support system for all the Canadians in the region. What does CBC Dubai mean for you?
It is nice to have an anchor just to kind of keep us grounded. And so for me, it's been embassy and or consulate and also the CBC. So it's just a way to go, these are my people. We speak the same language, not necessarily in terms of English, but we have the same understanding of how things go. So we were talking about earlier about can we all just agree on going right or left? And so when you align with your business community, your consular community, what have you, just feel a sense of understanding without having to explain everything. And that sense of familiarity is really worth something. And it becomes your community away from home, and you can tap in or not, but at least it's there. And so you're not just flailing in the wind by yourself.
Dr. Louise, my last question to you would be, what advice would you give to someone who wants to follow in your footsteps?
I don't know if I have advice. I think maybe it's just advice for life. And I tell this to my students because they're like, how do we make sure we're going to be successful? And I'm like, I don't think there's a recipe. I honestly think we just make it up as we go along. And that's okay. And if you make a decision and it's not a good decision, then you just make another decision. Like, it's as simple as that, right?
Absolutely. And I think the younger generation hasn't figured out that we haven't yet figured things out either.
And you know what? You probably won't either. So just stop pressuring yourself. There are no answers. You just figure it out as you go.
Thank you so much for being on my show, Dr. Louise. Once again, it was an absolute pleasure having you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Powerful Podcast series. If you'd like to reach out, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or email me. See you in the next episode.